Welcome back to Japan Dreaming. My desire in making these videos is to actually give you hope. At the moment in the Western world, there's a whole host of problems that people are confronting, usually to do with prices. And one of the biggest prices or bills that you have to pay in the West, or anywhere really, is your accommodation. If you can avoid that, or if you can minimize that, then you'll be a lot further ahead. The reason I came to Japan was to buy a cheap house, an Akiya. The reason for that was to give myself a lifestyle and to enjoy what time I have left on this planet. And I'm hoping the same for you, because life doesn't have to be a drudgery. You don't have to be working, pay bills, and then dying. Japan is not your only option. There are other places in the world that have the same issues as Japan in terms of demographic decline, which means the population is decreasing. Spain and Italy, for instance, have programs where you can move to some of the villages and they will make you payments up to $16,000 to move into a small village, work as a digital nomad, try and revitalize the place. And it's the same in Japan. Some places they will give you assistance. They may pay for your renovation costs if you buy an abandoned house, for instance. My message to you is don't give up hope. There are options in the world. You are not stuck, and life can be much more enjoyable than you think. So this week we're going to look at some of the options in Japan and some of the negatives, I suppose, sort of things you have to consider before you make the leap of moving to Japan. Also, the research that you're going to need to do before you get here. So hopefully that will help to set you on the path. And then the following week, we'll actually start looking at some of these Akiya and how to find them. In my last video, I mentioned permanent residency and how difficult it was to get that in Japan. But there are other options, of course. You don't have to get permanent residency. And if you buy a house in Japan, it doesn't confer residency upon you. You still have to deal with visa requirements and all that kind of thing. So the simplest thing you can do is just come here on a 3-month visa. Some countries you can extend that to 6 months, but 3 months should give you a pretty decent idea of whether you like Japan and whether you can find a place that suits your requirements. Perhaps the most common option that people want to stay a bit longer and decide really if Japan is for them is to simply become an English language teacher. Japan has a very low level of English ability, which is kind of strange. One of the reasons for that is that they're taught English at school, but they don't really get to practice it because Japan is such an homogenous culture. There are really very few foreigners here in comparison to the Japanese population. Some people will understand you and they will speak to you, but there's a certain level of shyness there as well. But anyway, you could come to Japan as an English teacher. There are various companies that will place you in positions in Japan. They will subsidize your accommodation and they will pay you, from memory, I think it's about $25,000 to $30,000 a year. Now that's enough to live on here quite okay. You will gradually learn some Japanese. You will learn to get about the country. You will get a feel for whether Japan is really for you. So it has a lot of advantages doing things that way. And I'll put some links in the description box below to tell you some of the companies that you could speak to about coming to Japan and teaching English. Step 1 of your plan is going to be research. You really need to know before you go what it is that you're looking for and where it is that you want to live.
Japan is a very diverse country. You can go from Hokkaido and the snowfields all the way down to Okinawa, where you've got subtropical, beautiful beaches, warm swimming. If you're expecting Japan to be full of this type of thing, which is traditional martial arts, samurai swords, geisha girls, tea ceremony, volcanic mountains, Buddhism, shrines, temples, bridges and nature, then yeah, you can find it. It's there. It's just not as obvious as you might think in a lot of places. Because you have to take into account that Tokyo, for instance, is the largest city in the world in terms of population. So it's busy because it has 37 million people in it. That's more than the population of Australia in one city. And it's an interesting city, but it's also busy. So you can see here at places like Shibuya Crossing, the most busy crossing in the world. This temple, Senshoji, which is in the city, 55,000 tourists every day. Now, if you love cities, it's great, but when you're looking for an Akiya, pick a place that's going to suit the type of lifestyle you want. If you like skiing, obviously be near a ski resort, but of course those places tend to be a bit more expensive and you might be hard pressed to find an Akiya close by. If you love swimming, if you love the beach, then the Izu Peninsula or some other areas in Japan or even Okinawa are possibilities. But just decide on that first so that you actually have some sort of direction when you get here. And another thing to look for is that the area that you want to go into isn't dying. With the movement of people away from the villages, this is becoming a problem in terms of shops closing down and infrastructure being depleted. So have a look at this interview here that Chris Broad did to give you an idea.
How can we say that Japan has gotten worse? And I think for that, we need to look to the third location that I used to live, and to the countryside as a whole. This year, of Japan's 47 prefectures, 46 of them saw a drop in their population. Japan's population peaked in 2010 with 128 million people. Today, that number is 123 million, and by 2056, that is forecast to drop below 100 million. When you go out into the countryside, you see what that looks like. But rather than me sit here and tell you about it, we do know a guy who lives in the countryside who can explain this dire situation far better than I ever could. So how has Japan changed for you in the last 10 years out in the countryside? Good or bad?
I think maybe bad. Because people down. 特に僕なんかお店してるけど、お客さんはもうほんと少なくなってきてるね。もうこれは目に見えてわかる。カントリーサイドは特にアーリーショップクローズ。前までは8時まで、8 o'clock。でもね、今6時とか5時とかさ、あと休みが週に2回、1 week 2 holiday ショップ。だから田舎はね、住むのも大変だし、遊ぶところもどんどんなくなってきてる。でも僕は飲み続けるしかない。Forever drinking time.
If you're interested in the countryside, then a kominka, a traditional Japanese farmhouse, is possibly the way to go. The beauty of these is that they're usually relatively cheap and they have lots of space. You know, you get places with like 7, 8 rooms. They often have car parking spaces, but they may not necessarily be close to amenities. Sometimes they are. It might be a bit of a hike to the local train station, for instance, or shopping centre. But people have done it and they've enjoyed it. And one of those people has a YouTube channel called Tokyo Llama, which I recommend that you have a look at if a kominka is the way you want to go.
Wait, what? Didn't you have grey hair? Yes, I did. I decided to dye my hair when I came to Japan. I planned to do it a long time ago, but the last time I did it, about 10 years ago, I ended up burning my scalp and being out of action for 2 weeks because of the chemicals. So my wife found this stuff, and no, they are not paying advertisement on this site and they're not a sponsor. I just like this stuff. It's got no chemicals and seems to work really well. So yeah, if you're interested in changing your hair colour. I actually don't mind the grey, but if you like it or don't like it, please comment below. Thank you.
Now, I'm not trying to put you off Japan, but Japan really is the home of natural disasters. 7% of all active volcanoes in the world in Japan. 10% of all earthquakes in Japan. 20% of all earthquakes stronger than magnitude 6 in Japan. An average of 26 typhoons passing near or over Japan every year. And an average of 2,000 landslide disasters every year. So it's a scary place, it sounds like at least, with exploding volcanoes and floods and typhoons and earthquakes and God knows what. But to be honest, I've been here 6 times now, and the most I've ever experienced was probably a 3-second earthquake. Yes, these are things to be worried about, because they do happen and they have taken a lot of lives in Japan. But the Japanese have dealt with these things for centuries, so they've become fairly resilient about it. Unfortunately, their best laid plans sometimes fall apart and you get things like this happening. But that's sort of unusual. And you have to take into account that you could be hit by a bus tomorrow. So sometimes taking a risk isn't as dangerous as you think. Sometimes taking no risk at all is the real danger. And remember, you're a long time dead, so try and make the most of it while you're here.
The other thing I want you to think about, other than location, is what type of house do you want? In my case, it has to have a balcony. Definitely has to have a balcony. And an open plan kitchen living area. If it had a side cottage or a side building, that would be handy as well. And it has to have a parking space. A lot of places don't have parking spaces, so if you think you'll be traveling a lot by car, you're going to need it. If you want to rent it out, again, you might need it for people who are coming from the city by car. Another aspect that people don't often consider is being lonely in Japan. A lot of people talk about that, and it is an issue. The Japanese are not easy people to get to know. They're quite shy and they're a bit scared of foreigners. If you're worried about being lonely, then maybe you need to weigh that up. But also take this into account. If you have issues in your home country that you haven't resolved, then moving to another country may not resolve them either, because wherever you go, you're taking you with you. Okay, so the Buddha may never have said that, but you get the idea. But having said that, sometimes a move to another place is the best thing you can do for your mental health, because you get away from all those things that might be blocking you from a happier life. If you want to get some encouragement about that, then I suggest you look at the videos by a woman called Chani from Australia. The link is in the description box below. Now, Chani was about 50 when she moved from Australia, left her family and friends, came to Japan, bought an Akiya, and seems to be living here quite happily. And I think she's quite gutsy and inspirational. So I recommend her videos to you if you're concerned that loneliness might be an issue for you. Now, I love Japan, but Japan may not be for everyone. And there are reasons why maybe you should not move to Japan. And so I've put a link to a video called Why Not to Move, called Why You Should Not Move to Japan. In the links below. And I suggest that you watch it before you come here. That's it for now, and next video we'll look at some actual Akiya on the Izu Peninsula and how you go about finding them and dealing with real estate agents, etc. So until then, stay safe. See you next time.